So the Sapphire Heiress is about a woman who is the daughter of a Filipina immigrant and an English shipbuilder, and she loses her fortune and must become a governess in the very home that she was raised in. But an old enemy reveals that her father was actually a pirate and that she has a secret inheritance that can help her escape her life of servitude. So she has to team up with this pirate and find this fortune. So it's basically like a treasure hunt, and within the treasure is a magical sapphire that the pirate is after and that he is trying to trying to find for secret reasons, I will say.
Ooh, that's fun.
Yeah, so I have heard readers say that it's like Cinderella meets Pirates of the Caribbean. It's very suspenseful. There's lots of adventure. And like I said, there's a treasure hunt in it. So the scene that I'm going to be reading today is from Locke's point of view, and Locke is the pirate. And in that scene, he tells the heroine about her father's pirate past, and it's the first time that she hears about it. So this is chapter 9, The Key. Grass and weeds crunched as Locke cut across the quiet lawn. Birds chirped overhead, and the scent of dew hung heavily in the early morning air. Recently, mornings in the country had become far more tolerable. Hell, life had become far more tolerable. Something he suspected had everything to do with Miss Blackthorne. In this world he knew so well, she was something entirely different. Not at all what he'd expected to encounter here. Her strength was unlike any he had ever seen in her father. He liked to think she was not Alistair Blackthorne's daughter, but he couldn't deceive himself, no matter how difficult the truth. He still found it hard to believe that Alistair, the man who had been a brother and an enemy to him, was 6 years dead. His body eaten away to the bones now, Nathaniel's too. The thoughts wore heavily on him, depressing him anew. He didn't need another reminder of his unnaturally enduring youth, not now, not when she was so close by. Leaning against a tree, Miss Blackthorne hadn't yet noticed his approach. She didn't seem much aware of her surroundings at all. She looked to be thinking to herself about what he feared to know. Standing there, she had that pained look again. Her eyebrows were drawn together and wrinkled, something he knew had everything to do with him. The vivacity that had once surfaced in her smile was gone, a vivacity he'd likely destroy entirely when all this was over, and that was the best of outcomes. Locke squeezed his eyes shut. A comparable piece of his past clawed at him again. Watching her alone and unawares seemed to evoke the memory even stronger. The smell of sea was back, and just as he had done for Miss Blackthorne, he was making a promise, one he would fail to keep. He shook himself from the image, from the stark splash of blood. He had to keep control. And that meant freeing both himself and Miss Blackthorne from Ellsworth. The plan would indeed protect the Sapphire. It's about nothing other than that, he told himself. His cares were focused on the Sapphire alone. He had priorities, after all. He hardly thought of revenge anymore, and never like Ellsworth did. Finding the key needed to come first, and if there was another clue to be discovered with it, Ellsworth was right. He wanted to be sure the other man wasn't there to find it. He cleared his throat, prompting Miss Blackthorne to look up. The keen eyes he had meant to avoid caught him now, pulling him down into their depths. The moment put him on edge. Like a sudden storm, the feeling struck without warning, and now that he was caught in it, he feared he was already lost. I feel I should thank you, she said. For what? For insisting on meeting me alone. Yes, well, he stumbled, surprised that her trust had been so easily gained. Did you find the vault? He shook his head. We'll search again. In the growing silence, Miss Blackthorne leaned against the tree, careless of how the bark might catch her dress. May I ask, she began with caution, why you insisted on meeting me alone? The question brought his eyes back to hers. The fearful gaze he remembered from the previous day was gone, replaced instead with a calm resolve. He blinked hard. He hadn't done it for her sake, if that's what she was asking. The man irritates me, nothing more. If you really wanted to get rid of Ellsworth, you could, you know. She held a hand to her throat, her eyes cast down, too afraid to say the actual words. He almost smiled at the idea, save for the contempt that laced each word. It was one form of disrespect he could never stand. Kill him, you mean? You're a pirate, aren't you? It would be easy for you. As much as I despise the man, her hands quivered. She couldn't even bring herself to finish the words. Say I do kill him, Locke crossed his arms. How would you look upon me then? With gratitude, she looked up, locking eyes with him, almost hopeful. No, you would be disgusted. You would look upon me with fear. Now you venture to be noble when all this time, just how should I act? Locke demanded. Like a vagrant, a common thief? Piracy may not be the most noble profession, but for more than a century, it was noble enough for your family. Miss Blackthorne stared at him, evidently still working to make sense of the words. He was surprised he had said them at all. He hadn't meant to reveal that fact. Not yet. What I mean is that your father was no better man than I, he clarified. Perhaps if she knew the truth, she would look upon him with less scorn. He was a man of fortune, he spoke louder, hoping to evoke her this time. A pirate, just as I. Miss Blackthorne's sneer of incredulity shifted to anger with one fierce blink of her lashes. Even then, he could tell she was beginning to entertain the possibility. She'd likely had an inkling of it all along. We're not all toothless savages, he began. Some of us even have great houses, even great names. Mae just stared off, ignoring him. Why do you think your house has all those tunnels you mentioned? They were pirates with a great many enemies and an even greater deal of loot. But you kill the innocent. You kill for greed. So did your father when it was necessary. He had everything a pirate needs. A flag that struck fear into the hearts of men and a bloody fast ship. No, I don't believe you. On my honor, you come from a line of pirates. Every ancestor, as far back as 5 generations, has taken to the sea in search of wealth. Miss Blackthorne looked away, her eyes searching. Had she really never heard the rumors? Had her family managed to keep her that sheltered? Your father's father was a pirate too, just as he was a shipbuilder. My grandfather? Nathaniel Blackthorne. Just saying the name brought him back. We traveled the high seas together, sailed waves the size of oceans, or the size of mountains. What are you saying? Miss Blackthorne laughed. The truth. Nathaniel, Alistair, and I captured more precious cargo than you could ever dream. Of course, Alistair later betrayed me and stole my share of the profits. Typical pirate, eh? Wait, she held up a hand. You're saying that you and my grandfather worked side by side? He stopped sailing in his 30s. And you're what? How old exactly? 32, Locke cleared his throat. What choice had he but to reply? There was no disguising his youth. She shook her head. You're lying. You would have been very young at the time. Locke cursed the slip. Sooner or later, she might very well discover that truth. Just not now. She would think him the devil. Her opinion of him was low enough. My family, we were merchants until they fell upon hard times. Had you not the opportunity, would you not have seized it too? How could she be so naive about the ways of the world, particularly how the higher classes attained their wealth in the first place? They took it. Don't you see? It became a shroud, he continued. Your father's business was nothing more than a lie to keep hidden their true line of work. That way they could still parade around society with their ill-gotten wealth. What? Miss Blackthorne looked away and bit her lip. He could tell she didn't believe him. Pirates spend all their lives at sea. They have to retire sometime. It can't be. Your family brought me into it, I must say. I helped increase their profits a great deal. At that, Miss Blackthorne's face soured with pain. Why do you think your father spent so much time at sea? Haven't you ever thought of it? I thought it was just part of the business. What did you think he was doing all those weeks? Why do you think your brother— Stop it, Miss Blackthorne screamed suddenly and loudly. She twisted away and sank into the large stone at the base of the tree. They're dead. They cannot defend themselves. I won't hear you blacken their names. I speak only the truth. I told you it's impossible. Locke released a stream of frustrated curses under his breath. He regretted disclosing her family's long-established venture into piracy, more so than he had been old enough to partner with her father. Now she only thought him madder than she already did. Arms crossed, she sat there obstinate. So you're one of those, he said. One of what? One of those people who has to see something to believe it. I'm certainly not fool enough to believe everything I hear, especially your far-fetched claims. Enough of this, he let out a breath. Something about her regarding him a liar bothered him. But I don't have the time to bother with that now, he lashed at himself. This key where? Here, Miss Blackthorne lifted her arms to encompass their surroundings. Amidst the languid flower bed and brittle branches that had once been bushes, the only living thing stood in the center, a tree so ancient and wide it provided shade to almost every corner of the courtyard. Here at this tree, Locke studied its gnarled, twisted bark. He had seen it before, but where he could not be sure. The species, whatever it was not native to England. He picked at a leaf, taking a small seapot in his hand. What tree is this? The poisonous kind, particularly those seeds you're holding. Her lips quirked almost to a smile. Locke dropped them. How do you know? My father told me. He said that this tree is really a work of art, and yet it also serves a purpose. Shading us from the heat, poisoning our enemies, but more often, art has no purpose. It's just art for the sake of art. Ars gratia artis, she shrugged. It's a simple enough clue. Yet only one she could decipher. Hardly the words of a pirate, she added.